Next, I wanted to dive into the Kyrsten Sinema situation, and I have a clip to show you guys. This is Andrew Perez of the Daily Poster. He went on Breaking Points to discuss Sinema's latest corruption, sort of how her corruption has evolved through this reconciliation process this year. So this is the first part of that discussion. This is Andrew Perez on Breaking Points.
Our weekly partnership segment with the Daily Poster. They are always all over covering the corruption and following the money here in DC. Joining us with his very latest reporting is Andrew Perez with the Daily Poster. Andrew, great to see you.
Good to see you, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you've got a bit of an update on the cash flowing to one Senator Kyrsten Sinema to oppose things that are, supported by like 80 and 90% of the public. Let's throw this tear sheet up on the screen. Very latest, Pharma Front Group has spent $1.2 million backing Sinema. The subhead here says a front group funded by Big Pharma is running even more ads, praising Kyrsten Sinema, who just gutted Dems' drug pricing plan. What did you find, Andrew?
Sure. A couple of months ago, we reported that this group called Center Forward had spent, actually a few $100,000, up to $600,000 supporting Sinema while she was kind of making moves behind the scenes to oppose Democrats' plan to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. The latest is they've just before Democrats announced that they had reached a kind of compromise with Sinema, Center Forward put another few $100,000 on the air, launching a new ad campaign supporting her. The ad is something really, it's like kind of like purest corporate propaganda you're ever going to see. You might think that they're selling a car commercial. Like there's some sports car going through the desert, someone racing on a horse through the desert. It's really the most vapid kind of propaganda you're ever going to see. And it's, being done at a time when she has been boosting their donors. Center Forward has been funded significantly by Pharma, the lobbying group in DC. They've given them at least $4.5 million in recent years, which accounted for about a quarter of its revenue. So, this is a Pharma Front group that's masquerading as a kind of centrist organization, but it's really kind of flown under the radar. But if you look it up, there's actually a lot of people on Twitter in Arizona complaining about the ads.
Interesting. Andrew, I mean, this is just the latest in kind of what we've seen. What else have you guys uncovered in the money behind Sinema?
Sure. So we recently did a story about the Better Medicare Alliance, which had been pushing Democrats to, not to include dental and vision benefits under Medicare as they'd kind of campaigned on. And they had spent, last time we looked, about $500,000 boosting Sinema. The other thing we've reported on how she's seen a big influx in pharma donations over the course of this year. I think she's up to about $600,000 in just donations from Pharma for her career now, including about $100,000 earlier this year.
My personal favorite industry that Kyrsten Sinema is getting lots of cash from is the quote-unquote multi-level marketing industry, which basically legalized pyramid schemes. She's the lone holdout on the pro-union, pro-act, which is a main priority for that, I would say, fraudulent industry to try to get killed. So there's, corruption stories of Kyrsten Sinema abound. Of course, I think we are really bearing the lead, which is her eccentric dress, I think is what voters should really care about and really focus on. What's your response to the fact that you really haven't run a single sartorial piece about Kyrsten Sinema yet in the Daily Poster?
We're looking for the right correspondent to handle that kind of coverage. I don't think it's going to be me, but we're going to find someone.
Okay,
right, yeah.
Good. Glad to hear
that's the
that.
real important stuff.
I love that ending. You haven't run a single sartorial piece on Kyrsten Sinema. What's wrong with you? It's actually how the media treats her, though. Right? She's different. She, they want to play all that up instead of talking about, oh, she's corrupt and like holding back progress and unsurprising, certainly, that she has seen an increase in her income from Big Pharma. and rapacious industries who don't want to see, any help for those efforts to unionize. I think corruption often, like, one thing I will say, and I'm sure most of my audience understands this, but I think it's important to go over every now and again. I think that people might misunderstand the nature of corruption in one sense. I think we all kind of like initially have this idea that it's this very explicit quid pro quo. Some guy with a briefcase gives you the money and you agree to do this or that. And like, I think it's just much more discreet than that, you guys. I think that, like, I'll use Donald Trump as an example. He used to donate to all sorts of politicians. Why? Because now you've bought off whoever wins. So it's not just it's not quite as explicit as I think a lot of people tend to think of it as. It's really like buying influence, and it kind of goes both ways. So when Sinema does something that industry likes, now they're going to start paying her more, right? It's not always this very direct, I took money, now I'm going to do, you know what I mean? So the corruption, and that's why they can get away with it, is because it's more implicit, and it's you can't really go to court and say, here's the email where she agreed to vote no on this bill if I gave her $100,000. You're not going to find that, because it's just a little bit, it's a couple layers below that. You know what I mean? So it is very obviously quid pro quo, but it's just the dance is a little bit more nuanced and allows them to kind of like skirt any form of regulation or consequence for their corruption, right? So it's unsurprising that as Sinema continues to behave as a conservative, as a corporate conservative, that these industries would continue to shower her with cash, right? And that also, it's kind of like it's a little bit like training a fucking dog. You know what I mean? Like, oh, she's doing the right thing, shower her with the money, maybe she'll do it again, kind of a thing, right? And I don't know. I actually do. You'll see in my discussion with Vinay, I'm somewhat confused by Sinema's strategy here, just because there comes a point where a policy is so popular that even if you're corrupt as all hell, it seems, at least on the surface, to go against a politician's best interest to oppose it. So there's part of this that is somewhat surprising, in the sense that, like, when, like, to gut a bill of 70-80% policies with 70 or 80% approval, it seems like you reach a point where, especially in a state like Arizona, where you need every last vote, it's almost like she's pissing her Senate seat away in favor of some sort of other job. It's almost like she's not going to run again, or doesn't intend to win, and is setting herself up for some private sector job post Senate. That's honestly how it feels to me. And Vinay and I kind of discussed that a little bit in the interview that you'll see later. But it's just, it's puzzling when you reach the point that you're just so explicitly willing to engage in this, because you do have to win fucking votes, right? As feckless as our democracy is, or the democratic pressures in our system are, you do still need to win votes. And when you vote against 80% of your constituents over and over and over again, you would think that that's like inherently risky, right? Even though in DC, the brain rot makes them think the opposite, that like being remotely bold on anything, even if it has 80% approval, is considered the risky thing. So maybe she just has DC brain rot. Maybe I don't know. But I'm honestly, I'm to the point that I'm kind of speculating she might just have no intention of staying in the Senate. She might well just be trying to set herself up for some sort of, consulting job with big pharma or some shit, one of the revolving door gigs. We'll have to see. It's unfortunate that this kind of corruption exists within our system. Oh, and the other thing I really wanted to say about this, you guys, and I know I've probably mentioned this before, and I know that you all are probably aware of this, but notice how taboo it is in the media to mention the money that they're taking. Like the media has to treat them like, oh, no, they're just moderate. It's principled. They're just being, this is just their ideology. Well, first of all, it's not moderate. When you repeatedly go against 80% of the country, what I call that is fringe right. That is far right. By definition, you're opposing 80% of the country and taking the position with the 20% minority. That's not moderate. Okay. Whatever you want to call it, it's not moderate. And on these particular issues, it is fringe right. To oppose paid family leave, or to oppose tuition-free college, or, that's a right-wing position, okay? So the media has to misframe that in order to kind of maintain their own survival, really, their corporations, right? So the narrative has to be a right-wing narrative for their own survival. But the other one that they do is they just ignore the corruption. They have to treat it like it's just a political view, a principled take, an ideology. And yet compare that to how they treated Trump was not an insider. So he gets, we're going to follow the money with Trump, right? We're going to follow all these, we're going to go down these ridiculous avenues about Russia. We're going to follow the money. We're going to call him corrupt. We're going to press, prosecutors around the country to fucking prosecute him for financial crimes and this and that. No problem when it's an outsider having that narrative in the media. As soon as it's an insider, as soon as it's an establishment type, it becomes entirely taboo to bring up money at all. And I think I discussed previously how Bernie's former campaign manager, Faiz Shakir, went on, I think it was CNN, might have been MSNBC, and Heidi Heitkamp was there too. And Heitkamp takes a whole bunch of money to spew a bunch of nonsense and do propaganda for corporations and the establishment stuff. And Faiz brought up the money that Heidi takes to spew the opinions that those paying her want her to spew. And the host, I don't even remember which host it was immediately like, oh, well, we're not questioning Heidi Heitkamp's principle though, right? Like we're not questioning her integrity, right? Of course we are. Like, it's your fucking job to do it. That Faiz had to bring this up when the journalist sitting there refused to mention to her audience who she was having on or what influences that person might be. There's no journalistic ethics remaining at all in any of this. And it's just, if you're an insider, we're going to protect you. And if you're an outsider, we're going to attack you. So it's no longer we're going to hold the powerful to account. It's we're going to hold a small minority of the powerful to account. And we are going to be sycophants to the rest of them. Right. And it's so Manchin and Sinema get to hide behind this sort of curtain that the media provides for them and sit there and do their corrupt, dirty nonsense. And no one ever really sees it unless you really are paying attention to politics. And it's also worth noting, you guys, like, we're kind of in a bubble here. If you're watching this show, you're probably a political junkie. You probably pay attention to a degree that the vast majority of the country does not, right? Who's seeking out independent political content? Political junkies are, okay. Most people watch an hour of CNN a day and think they're informed. So it really does make a difference and matter. And we need to be able to expose this kind of corruption and disallow the media from sheltering these individuals from that criticism, right? So anyway, yeah, Sinema's corrupt. Surprise, surprise, everybody, right? I want to move on here to some of this.